Episode 2, Love Like Gravity. Chapter 1, The Launch. The bookstore on Creditoa Street glittered the way paper sometimes does under too bright light. Display tables were arranged like small, respectful islands. A black and white poster announced, Alexander Krawick, the work behind the work. Mira arrived early by accident and late by feeling. She stood near a shelf of translated poets, rehearsing a thank you she might never say. He appeared without performance, tall charcoal blazer, an expression like a well-made table, steady, useful, beautiful because it was meant to last. When the owner introduced him, his voice carried in an even register that made the room relax. He didn't charm, he steadied. He read a passage about discipline, how showing up daily is less about heroics and more about ordinary vows kept quietly. The example was a pianist practicing scales no one would ever hear. Myra felt the sentence land somewhere trustworthy inside her. During questions, a man asked about inspiration. Alek, according to the poster's signature, smiled slightly. Inspiration is weather, he said. Work is architecture. You need both, but only one holds the ceiling up. People laughed softly. Myra thought of her lighthouse poem and felt an unexpected yes. After the signing line thinned, she approached with a copy clutched at a polite angle. I liked your paragraph about vows, she said, heart doing fishy flips. I write poems. Then you know about vows, he replied, signing her book with a measured hand. What kind of poems? The kind that tried to name weather and failed gently. It came out more vulnerable than she'd planned. His mouth softened. That's a good failure, he said, and underlined his name as if emphasizing presence. They moved aside to let others through and found themselves at a small standing table with paper cups of dry wine. He asked about her retreat, her routine, her favorite poets. She asked about his morning, his desk, his favorite failure. He listened the way old floors listen, absorbing footfalls without complaint. She noticed the quiet elegance of his watch, the neatness of his nails, the way he waited a beat before answering as if measuring each word for fit. When the event ended, he helped the staff stack chairs without fanfare. She liked that. Outside, Warsaw wore early spring like a shy scarf. He walked her toward the tram and stopped at the curb as if there were a line he didn't cross without invitation. Would you like coffee sometime? He asked, tone even, eyes kind. I would, she said, surprised by the cleanliness of her yes. Saturday, he offered 10. I prefer mornings before the city remembers its calendar. He smiled, a small sunrise. On the tram, Myra read the inscription in her book, for Myra who names weather, aka a simple line, exact as a scale. She pressed the page to her chest and let the car's hum settle her. This was not Julian's quicksilver, not a dizzy uplift. This was gravity announcing itself quietly. I will hold you if you let me. At home, she placed the book beside her bed, next to the glass of water she still kept on the floor. She texted her friend Kasia, met someone very calm. My nervous system sighed. Kasia replied with 5 heart emojis and calm is hot. Myra laughed, turned out the light, and slept as if someone had finally turned the volume down on the world. Saturday at 10 felt like a vow already forming. Chapter 2, The Architecture of Two. They chose a cafe that looked like a study, wood tables, lamps with green glass shades, baristas moving with the purposeful hush of librarians. Alek arrived at 9:58, which somehow felt romantic. He took the seat facing the door. Habit, he said, catching her glance. I like to see what's coming. He drank his coffee black, not to perform austerity, but because sugar complicated the ledger. Myra added milk until the cup matched a color she could trust. They traded origin stories. He grew up in Lodz, an engineer father who believed in tight screws and loose praise. She in Gdansk, a grandmother who sang hymns while peeling apples. He ran every morning, same route, rain accepted without fuss. She wrote late at night when the city's attention wandered. What's your ritual? She asked. 2 pages of notes before I open email, he said. Not for art, for mind, then I build the day. I don't always keep the plan, but I start with an architecture. He glanced at her, not apologizing for structure. You. I light a candle and tell myself I can stop after 1 paragraph, she said. I never stop after 1, it tricks me kindly. He smiled. We're compatible in devotion, if not method. Their second meeting was a walk along the Vistula, wind bossy, geese tilting the air. He asked to read her poems. She said yes, scared and wanting. He sent an essay in return, margins neat with references to stone and scaffolding and the grace of maintenance crews. She admired his precision, the clean tendons of his sentences. He admired her images and said so without adjectives. "This line works," he'd write. "Circling the moon is a coin in the coat pocket of night. Consider removing very here." She liked how his notes asked her to consider rather than obey. Respect felt like a clear surface you could lay your work on without it getting wet. Their first kiss happened after the walk at her gate under a light that made dust look like a slow snowfall. It was deliberate, not hesitant, his hand at the hinge of her jaw, her palm on his chest where breath sets its metronome. No rush, no show, a kiss with a level. She stood in her hallway afterward and thought, this is a new version of sweet. They dated like people building a bridge from both sides. He made a risotto that tasted like a patient decision. She brought a bottle of wine she'd bought because the label had a tiny lighthouse. They watched a documentary about pianists who practiced scales as prayer. He liked that she cried at the soft parts and didn't apologize. She liked that he put a hand on her knee, not to stop the feeling, but to accompany it. Intimacy grew as orderly as ivy on brick. When they undressed, it felt less like heat and more like a room being made. He was attentive without flourish, asking before, asking during, asking after, an engineer inspecting load-bearing beams. She guided him with murmured suggestions and gestures that said here now, wanting to keep the structure human. Their bodies learned each other carefully, the way fingers learn an instrument by showing up daily. No fireworks, no spectacle. A steadiness that surprised her with its tenderness. When she stayed the night, he left a glass of water on her side of the bed without comment. She noticed the quiet kindness and felt her chest make space. Gravity does not announce itself, she wrote in her phone's notes, it simply holds. Chapter 3, The Ledger. 3 weeks in, their calendars began behaving like neighbors, waving, borrowing sugar. Alek sent her a shared doc titled Logistics with 2 tabs, Us and Other Obligations. It should have made her itch, it made her laugh instead. You made us a spreadsheet, she teased on the phone. I made us a place to remember ourselves, he said. Memory is romantic, my memory is practical. She admired practicality when it carried warmth. He brought sandwiches to the park and unfolded a blanket efficiently, corners square. He liked a plan, yes, but he wasn't rigid. When a street musician started a melancholy tango, he stood and offered his hand, and they fumbled a dance that was mostly hugging to a rhythm. After breathless, he admitted, I planned to be spontaneous. She kissed his cheek and said, it counts. Alek admired her creativity in ways that changed how she sat in her chair. You locate a human pulse inside abstraction, he said, after reading a poem about fog having manners. You don't get lost there, you guide. Praise from him felt earned, not dispensed. He asked her what support looked like. She said, read the poem and tell me where it breathes. He said, tell me when to be quiet and when to bring tea. She laughed and told him both. He did both well. Yet small ripples began. She noticed when her voice wandered into speculation. What if the poem also wants a cityscape there? His brow pinched gently like a measuring tape tugged. Is that necessary? He'd ask. It was a fair question. It also sometimes made her stomach cave a little, as if the room had lost a degree of air. One evening she arrived buzzing with something she couldn't name, sadness or weather or a memory flare. He made dinner as if solving a pleasant problem, searing, salting, plating like a diagram. Talk me through the storm, he said, setting fork and knife at precise angles. She tried, words came out tidal, looping. He listened, tracking, then offered a sequence. If we map triggers and responses, we can reduce the spiral. You could journal before texting me, or set a 90-minute rule before decision-making. It's illogical to act inside a spiral. The word snagged, illogical, he meant unhelpful, she heard untrustworthy. It's not a math error, she said, small. It's a wave. I know, he said gently and touched her wrist. I'm trying to protect the boat. I am the water, she said without meaning to. The sentence scared her a little, how true it sounded. He nodded, considerate, as if filing it under parameters. That night their intimacy was tender and careful, a choreography of check-ins. When she trembled with a feeling she couldn't name, he asked, too much, and she said, no, keep, grateful for the respect and faintly mournful that the room had grown so orderly. After he stroked her hair with measured cadence and she, almost asleep, whispered, don't measure this. He paused, then slowed his hand to nothing at all, letting quiet do the work. Chapter 4, Microclimates. Mira wrote a poem called Blueprint for Rain, gave it to Alek the way you hand someone a glass bowl. He read it twice, nodding. Your last stanza over-explains, he said. The image already carried it. He was right, she cut it. She appreciated the way he helped her be more herself. They began a Saturday ritual market, coffee, a bench along the river where gulls auditioned for louder lives. He carried the heavier bag without making it a spectacle. She tucked oranges into his coat pockets as if feeding a gentle bear. They spoke about work, about the neighbor's dog, about retirement as a concept. He had a plan, of course. She had a dream. The bond was slow, sincere, made of ordinary yesies. One evening he surprised her with tickets to a string quartet. The hall was all wood and hush. As the cello settled into its low ache, she felt tears arrive the way dusk does, quietly, suddenly everywhere. Alek took her hand, thumb circling a steady comfort. This, she thought, is what people mean when they say safe. Outside they wandered. He pointed out a building he admired. Clean lines, no fuss. It knows what it is, he said. She looked up and thought of her own interior rooms where weather gathered, doors open, a piano that sometimes played itself. I am an old house with odd additions, she joked. He kissed her temple. Then we'll learn the floor plan. But she felt a cooling she couldn't name. At her apartment, she reached for him the way one reaches for a lamp in the dark. He met her with care and a kind of restraint that wasn't shyness, it was habit. They moved together in a rhythm that checked in every few beats. She appreciated it, and yet some part of her asked silently for a moment of abandon, a broken measure. He kissed her after as if to seal something, and she kissed back, already tender to the idea of being sealed. When storms came, they tried to engineer shelter. She texted, "I'm a mess," and he replied, "Come over. We'll make pasta and a plan." She did, they did. Plans helped, sometimes like rope, sometimes like a belt. On a Sunday, she left her glass of water on his floor by the bed. He stepped around it carefully in the night, respecting rituals he didn't need to understand. In the morning he said, "Let's get you a coaster." She laughed and nodded, and something small sighed inside her, unsure whether to be grateful or sad. She noticed she stopped crying in his presence, not because sorrow had left, but because it felt untidy here. She made a note, microclimates. In some rooms, rain refuses. Chapter 5, Managed Weather. The spreadsheet grew tabs, travel ideas, groceries, wish list functional. It was almost adorable. It was also a map that kept redrawing the city around her. Alek began sending her calendar invites for focus hours labeled with a modest precision. Mira poetry, deep work. At first she felt honored, as if someone recognized she was a person worth scheduling around. After the third invite, she felt a little like a project. At dinner, he offered optimizations. "If you set submission targets," he said, passing the salad, "the randomness becomes a system. Systems are kind to future you." He was right. He was also increasingly managing her weather report. When she said, "I need to float today," he'd answer, "Float from 1 to 2, then we'll decide dinner." It wasn't unkind, it was managerial. Intimacy began to mirror the calendar. He checked in with admirable attentiveness. She answered with admirable clarity. Pleasure arrived, sincere and warm, but the moments that used to blur edges now drew them crisp. She missed blur. When she reached for him impulsively, mid-sentence, he smiled and said, "Coffee first, then we can be late." She laughed, kissed his jaw anyway, and felt the moment shelved for later. One night, feeling raw for no reason she could name, she lay against him and tried to begin a messy cry. It hovered, indecisive. He brushed her hair back, waiting for a reason he could soothe. She couldn't translate the wave into bullet points. The tears retreated, leaving salt as rumor. "It's nothing," she said. "It's not nothing," he said. "We'll find its cause." He was so gentle that her heart did a terrible thing. It shut its door without slamming. After he fell asleep, she turned to the wall and whispered to nobody, "I need someone to sometimes drown with me." A few days later, he called her spiral illogical. The word wasn't aimed like an arrow. It tumbled out like a tool he trusted. Still, it pierced. They were at his table, receipts and notebooks out, trying to choose between 2 travel weekends. She was suddenly overcome by the way choices pretend to be simple when they're actually futures. He said, "Let's not let an illogical spiral cost us a lovely plan." She nodded, swallowed, folded herself into agreeable shapes. Later, she wrote a poem in which logic wore a tie to the beach and refused to take off its shoes. When he read it, he underlined the second stanza and wrote, "Good image." He wasn't wrong. She put the paper down and went very quiet, like a pond when wind stops. Chapter 6, Unsaid Rooms. Silence changed the apartment's shape. They still cooked together, his knife steady, her hand on the bowl to keep it from walking across the counter. They still went to the market, still touched each other with care, still made plans. The love didn't vanish. It dulled at the edges, like a coin rubbed smooth by years of hands. Mira began declining his calendar invites with polite notes, writing "At home today, we'll text after." She did text, but later and lighter, he noticed. "Are we okay?" he asked one evening, not accusatory, simply checking the load. "I'm a fog," she said, not looking up. "I don't want to be mapped." I don't map to control, he said. I map to keep us from getting lost. He believed it. That mattered and didn't. They tried to reset, no plans for a whole day. Spontaneity scheduled, she joked, and he had the grace to laugh. They wandered to a flea market. She bought a chipped saucer with a painted fish. He bought nothing and looked pleased about it. At home, she kissed him at the door with a hunger that surprised them both. He lifted her onto the counter with a rare abandon that broke 3 rules at once: risk, mess, unplanned. Heat found them and the room lost its angles. She thought, yes, here. This. He pulled back, breath ragged, and said, let me turn off the stove. She laughed and loved him and also felt something inside sit down and close its eyes. That night she tried to tell him, I feel managed, she said softly, more than loved. He went still, hurt, tightening his mouth. My management is love, he said. Who else plans rest for you? Who shows up when your weather gets wild? You do, she said, tears finally brimming. And then you tell the wave to ask permission. Sometimes I need to be the sea. He rubbed his forehead, choosing his next sentence like a wire to cut. I don't know how to love chaos, he admitted. I was taught to bolt shelves to walls. I am not a shelf, she said, not unkind. I'm sorry. She meant I'm sorry we are good and it still hurts. He reached for her hand steady. She took it. 2 competent people solving nothing. Chapter 7, The Last Night. They didn't schedule the last night. It arrived the way weather does when you stop talking about it. Rain tapped the window with an almost comic gentleness. Alek cooked as if the recipe could bless them, sage and butter, pasta like small moons. They ate slowly, tasting like prayer. Neither of them said this might be goodbye. Both of them felt it sitting at the table like a quiet ant. He put on a record, piano pieces that made stillness audible. They danced in that undance way couples do, sway, breathe, forehead to cheek. She tucked her fingers into the precise place between his shoulder and collarbone where trust lives. He kissed her hair and said her name like a decision. When they undressed, the room felt reverent, not rehearsed. He asked with his eyes, she nodded with hers. They moved toward each other with a tenderness sharpened by restraint, like stepping barefoot across a floor full of unbroken glass, careful, whole, very awake. She wanted to memorize his steadiness, the particular way he paused at the edge of her breath to hear it change. He wanted to memorize her reach, the way she pulled him closer as if closing a drawer gently. Pleasure arrived like a tide that knows the shore by heart. They stayed with it, not rushing, not taming, letting the ache be a language both could speak. When she trembled, he held her and did not ask if it was logical. When he shuddered, she kissed his temple and did not ask if it was planned. They let their bodies finish the sentence their mouths hadn't written. After they lay in a careful tangle, the kind you can leave without tearing, he traced her knuckles as if learning a map he wouldn't get to use often. She watched the ceiling find its color again. I wish, he began and stopped. I know, she said. The sentence didn't need its object. They both carried it. He fell asleep with the exactness of someone who trusts alarms. She stayed awake and wrote in her head, love like gravity, invisible, faithful, not enough to teach a bird how to land. She almost woke him to say thank you for the water on her side of the bed, for the steady hand, for the plans that sometimes did feel like rescue. She didn't. She let longing do its quiet work and tried not to make it a job. Near dawn, rain quit without applause. Chapter 8, Another Lifetime. Morning smelled like coffee and clean. Alek handed her a mug without commentary. They moved through the kitchen with practiced grace, a duet written by repetition. On the table, her book lay open to his inscription. For a long time, neither of them touched it. I don't want to stop, he said finally, voice level, the way you tell a doctor the truth. I also don't know how not to keep trying to fix. Fix meant plan, soothe, optimize, contain. He looked tired and very dear. I don't want to stop either, she said, but I can't become a schedule to stay loved. It wasn't accusation, it was a measurement taken twice. They didn't do a post-mortem, it would have been tidy and false. Instead, he walked her to the door and they kissed like people who know the cost of kissing and pay it anyway. On the landing, she turned back. We worked, she said, surprising herself with the gentleness of the verb, just not in the way that keeps working. In another lifetime, he said, trying on a smile, I'll be less afraid of tides. In another lifetime, she echoed, I'll wear a watch. He laughed, one clean note, and the sound hurt. She left before she could change the plan from feeling. At home, she didn't pack memories into labeled boxes. She let the room stand messy for a day. Then she made tea and opened a new document, barometer II, gravity. The first poem began, "We were a house built square on land that needed stilts. You tried to raise me level and I kept being water." She read it aloud and didn't send it to anyone. Grief moved through her like weather, sudden sun, cold wind, the kind of rain that makes windows honest. She answered friends with simple truths. "He's good, I'm sad." It was almost. She walked by the river and did not look for a plan in its current. Weeks later, she found the coaster he'd bought for her water glass, still in its paper sleeve. She put it on her bedside table and set her glass on it, not as compliance, not as rebellion, just as a reminder that care had lived here, even if it sometimes felt like management. She slept diagonally again, and in the morning woke with his steadiness lodged beside her softness, like two elements that don't react and still, somehow, make a world. On a warm evening, she read Gravity at an open mic. The last lines landed like a soft hammer. "You built a place for me to stand, and I wanted to be see. We were not wrong. We were only honest too late." The room went quiet in the way that means you have said something true. Afterward, a stranger pressed her hand and said, "Thank you for naming the good in what couldn't stay." Mira walked home along streets that remembered her, the sky practicing its long light of summer. She didn't need a forecast. She felt the weather changing and let it. In another lifetime, perhaps. In this one, she kept the vow that mattered most. She would be water and learn her own shores. Like this video, subscribe, more stories like this are coming.